Hi guys, welcome back. This is a very special episode of Dreyas Closet and Queer Talk and a very sickening collaboration. Today we're going to be getting into some topics about Transgender Day of Visibility. And today I have with me a very special person, Lisa Thomas.
Hi.
We're going to be sharing our experiences and our thoughts on different, subjects and topics. And I hope that you all are able to, to enjoy what we have to talk about.
Hi, I'm T. Douglas. My pronouns are he and him.
I'm Asher Brzezowski, and I use he, him pronouns.
All right, so the first question we have is coming out. And in that, the question I have is, what was that like for each of you? And, how did your family react? How did, your friends, etc.?
Well, for me, like all my life, my family already knew what was, my tea. So it wasn't a surprise when people found out, that I was gay in the beginning, and then, but, went farther and became, started to transition. It was a little difficult. It was rocky, you know what I'm saying? People trying to grasp the concept of what I was doing. I was also very much out there. So it was one thing to come out, but then I was so flamboyant and extra and just in your face. So not everybody handled it well, but I was blessed enough to have my family hold me down regardless of how I may have appeared or presented myself. My father, on the other hand, it took him a while to come around, but thankfully he did. What was your experience like coming out?
Okay, so coming out was I kind of came out on my own in my last year of high school.
The same.
Yeah, so I came out to myself first, and then people started finding out, and they brought to the attention of my family, and I was confronted by my father. And fathers are disappointed when their sons are not. They're already. I think they're disappointed already if you already have the mannerisms and you already have the femininity already ready. They try to figure out ways to
get rid of it.
To get rid of it.
Yeah.
So I always went through that through my entire childhood, but then to come out and to actually claim that it is what it is was very difficult for him, which made it more difficult for me. And then through my own self-identification as a first gay, I found out what it meant to be transgender or I met transsexuals, and I felt like a lot of questions I had about myself were answered. And so from there, I started to experiment with cross-dressing. I started experimenting with hormone therapy, and I spent a long time in and out of drag, and then finally, later on, I made a decision to just be myself and to fully transition, and that's what I've done, and that's how I'm living.
Period.
Yes.
My family and friends, I think, kind of expected it. I would say I came out technically when I was 7. I wrote a letter to my grandmother, told her hey, when I'm 18, I'm gonna be a man. And she's like, oh, well, if that's how you feel, write a letter to your parents. And they were pretty accepting from there. And I've always lived my life as a man, even when I wasn't presenting as one. And I think my family is more concerned about my safety than they are about how I present myself or who I am, they're more worried about all right, well, is he gonna be okay now, going to the grocery store even, or stuff like that, especially with everything that's going on now. My mom's constantly calling me now, hey, you still okay? I'm like, yeah. We're good.
So being trans, I actually had to come out twice. The first time I came out was before I realized I was trans, and I actually thought I was a lesbian. So it was before my transition. And that coming out was fine with friends, you know. I think the biggest part was like telling my family. I was 14 years old. So I remember writing a letter to my mother, and a couple of days later, because it took her a couple of days, we didn't really talk for those couple of days. And I remember her bringing the letter out and her asking me about it, and she was crying. She started crying in the middle of it, and one of the first things she said was, "What about grandkids?" And you know me, I hate to see my mom cry, so I was like sad and everything when she first, before she said the part about the grandkids, but once she said that part, and maybe it was a little insensitive of me, but once she said that, I kind of just lost it and started laughing, because in my mind I'm like, woman, you got 6 grandkids already. How many more is we shooting for? And like at 14, I'm like, yeah, no. So. But fast forward to many years later, you know, once I started realizing who I was as a person and transitioning, I'm like, oh God, I gotta go through this again. I have to tell my mother again. So I waited a pretty long time, actually, until I had scheduled my surgery. And I remember, because for months I had been on testosterone for a while already, and you know, I would start calling my mom. We'd be talking on the phone. Every time she'd answer the phone, it'd be like, she called me my nephew. She'd be like, "Is this Adam?" And I'd be like, "No." "Do you got a cold?" Because my voice was changing. And then finally I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I gotta tell her. So I finally told her, and I'm like, I had everything set up. I'm like, she cried last time, she gonna cry this time. I got Kleenex ready, you know, I got my calm tone ready, you know, let me go into it. And I tell her, and you know, when I was younger, my mom used to always say the same thing to me over and over again. Like, you're smart, you're intelligent, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. That's the one thing I remember my mom, or those are the things I remember my mother telling me from the time I was probably like 2-3 years old. As far back as I can remember, I can always remember her saying those things. You're smart, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. So that's how I started the conversation. Hey Mom, you know how you told me I could be anything I wanted to be when I grew up? Well, now I'm grown up and I'm gonna transition into a man. And I was ready for the waterworks, for the crying. And she goes, she thinks, and she goes, well, I know I raised you to make your own decisions, and you're extremely intelligent, and I think that you're at the time that you can make decisions for yourself, and you, like I said, you can be anything you want to be. And that was it. And I was a little disappointed because I bought all these Kleenex for nothing. But, you know, my mom really affirmed me in that moment and was like, you know, no matter how old you get and no matter what you decide with your life, like, you'll always be my child, you'll always be my baby, I'll always love you. And then she goes, and it doesn't matter what anyone else in the world, not even anybody in our family. She said a couple things about some people in our family, but then she moved on to say, you know, you tell them to come find me, like, you're always going to be my baby, and as long as you're happy, I'm happy. So I think after that moment, I had no issues telling anybody else because the person that I loved the most had no issues with it. So I think, you know, I always think back to this Wale song that's like, long as my mama loved me, don't ever leave no woman. So that's kind of like where it kind of went for me, in a sense. Like, you know, my mother loved me to the day she died. And if anybody else doesn't agree with my choices, I know that I've been affirmed since the day I was born. So like, that's kind of what my transition was like, family wise coming out. My friends, my sisters were more like, I think for them, they had no issues with it. It was just learning to change their pronouns from she to he. And then my nieces and nephews, who were older at the time, they were just kind of like, "Oh, we get to call you uncle now? Okay," and that was it. It seemed like the younger they got, the more they just understood. So I think I was blessed for my coming out, just because friends, family, close family, I had like a lot of acceptance.
Now, once you guys obviously came out and you were around community, especially as trans women, how did you navigate that? Was there pushback? Was there acceptance, etc.?
Well, for me, it was a bit of a struggle because not everybody respected my decision. Even like I didn't get my surgeries right away, so there was in any scene, it's always so shady. People are always very shady, and I used to get a lot of pushback for like my appearance, or I wasn't aesthetically like some of the other girls and things like that. Like, everybody's experience and journey is different. Like, people blossom at different points in their lives. Like, my experience now, I don't have pushback. Everybody's receiving me because I made improvements and like I'm more comfortable with myself. So, but unfortunately, like, it was a lot of shade, like with the girls, trying to come into the scene, because with that, they expect you to be the baddest bitch right away. Either you are or you aren't. Some people have to work hard towards it, and some people just, it's already like, it's just what it is, What are your thoughts on that? Miss Bengals.
I know. Coming out as trans is difficult, period. The early stages of transition are hard for everyone. And there's a lot, the main pushback that I received, and I think that other girls receive, is that people think that you are taking a person away from them, whoever you were prior to that.
True.
They feel like you're taking that away from them, and so they have animosity with that, reminding you that you were better. Why don't you just be yourself, or you're fine the way you are, or you're better the way that you were.
Or they'll find ways to mention your old name or your old self. And it's like, bitch.
Yeah. Transitioning has to be a journey that's for yourself. It has to be for yourself, and it has to be about yourself. And when you do it that way, when you ask that question, at the time when I made the decision that's what I was going to do, I did not care about my family's opinion. I no longer cared about my friends said. I didn't care about I knew I had to be who I was for me. And once you make that decision, you don't pay attention to pushback. It's like, you can say whatever you want. Even if you are looking crazy in the beginning and you're hearing it, and people, for some reason, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter for me. It was just like, I knew what I was going for, I knew what I was shooting for, and I knew what I had to do for me. So I did that. Yeah.
Work. That's it. I wish I would have had that mindset when I was a kitten, but unfortunately, I was bullied a lot even before, since a kid. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm very sensitive to, critiques or people judging me for, like I said, my appearance or my personality. So that was an issue for me in the beginning, because I felt like I had to be different other than being comfortable with the way I was, which is unfortunate. So if anybody's watching this, any kittens, young girls or young boys, trans men, trans women, please understand that it's a process, and you don't have to live up to everybody else's expectations. Work on you and do your big one. Don't let everybody's opinions get to you, because it got to me and it was not a good thing at all.
Now, you brought up something that actually kind of goes into the next thing I want to bring up, which was transitioning. Now, I believe there's 3 ways in one transitions and such. Can you break that down?
What do you mean?
So I believe, isn't it for documents, medical and stuff like that when you go through the transition and like
I don't
hormones?
think that there's really like a 3 set ways. What I've always heard is that there's a medical transition, there's a physical transition, there is a legal transition, there's a social transition, there's a spiritual transition for some people. So it's going to vary between different people. There is no set way on how anyone transitions. People transition very differently, and what their idea, what their interpretation of what it is going to be different for them. I think that what we really need to all stop doing is we need to stop putting things in a box when it comes to what it means to be a transsexual. I think when we use the scope, that's why I really try to, and I used it in the beginning of this, in the beginning of our conversation, I said transgender. I don't even like that word anymore. I identify as a transsexual, period. That's what it is. And when you go, when you're transsexual, when you're transitioning your secondary sexual characteristics, so that way you can live the life that you need to live, there's a process that's involved in that. That process is different for everyone. That process takes a different amount of time for everyone, and everyone's results are different. There's such thing as a successful transition, and there is a such thing as a unsuccessful transition.
Yes, it is.
And I think that once we start just saying that out loud, that there's people that have transitioned that came out unsuccessfully, and they had to reap the consequences of that unsuccessful transition. And that's going to vary as well for different people. So we don't put it in a box. We just understand that trans people, there is no roadmap to this. You can get help along the way. You can get guidance along the way, and you can learn from your experience the do's and the don'ts on your own. But there is no set anything for anybody, because you have women who are trans women. I only can speak for trans women because that's what I am, and that's the population that I socialize with. There are trans women who have been living as women for years, and because of the time that they came up in, they don't have their legal documentation changed yet for one reason or another. Or maybe they haven't had any surgery, or maybe they haven't hormoned the way that they have wanted to, or they decided that they did not want to hormone that much. So it's just different for everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think for me, my transition first was mental. I really believe you are who you say you are. So in my mind, I've always known who I was. And it's funny because I want to say like last year, I walked past the mirror and I had to stop because I was like, oh my God, I look exactly how I used to draw myself at 5, 6, 7 years old. So I think with that, the misconception is that we don't know who we are. And I think that's a big misconception because I work with youth, and the one thing I can tell you about them is at their age, they know who they are way more than I knew who I am at my age. I couldn't imagine, I knew that I was different as a kid, but I never had the words to, formulate anything besides, I feel like a boy, or I think I'm a boy. And even at that time, that was not something that you said out loud. I didn't start, my medical transition until I felt like that was what I needed to do. So for a long time, it was just a physical transition without, surgeries or testosterone. And for a long time, that is what it felt right for me, And then I got to a certain age where I'm like, okay, I need more than just, clothes and hair. And, there's something missing that I need to explore more of. And that's when I started with, okay, I think I'm ready to medically transition. And I think a lot of people think that as soon as someone says that they're trans, they're ready for surgeries. And it's not always like that. I think the misconception that people have is that everybody transitions the same way. And that's totally incorrect. I'm a black man of trans experience, whereas, I have other brothers in the lifestyle that are also black men of trans experience, and we've all had totally different transitions. And not even that, we all may identify I might identify as a African American man of trans experience. Some people might identify as a trans man. Some people might just identify as trans mass. So I think what it is that people think that there's this cookie cutter idea of how you have to transition and what transitioning means. And I think for everybody, it means something totally different. I had someone, when I was first transitioning, I heard someone explain it to me as, if you ever been to New York City, you know how the New York City train works. Everybody gets on that Penn Station, that's where it starts at. And then it ends in Montauk, way down at the other end. And what she said was transitioning is like a train. Everybody gets on at the beginning, but where they feel comfortable is the stop that they get off at. And just because you got off on this stop, it doesn't necessarily mean that is the stop that's forever for you. You might get back on that train and be like, hey, I need a couple more stops to feel complete. You might need to ride that train all the way to the end before you feel completion in yourself. But you might also get on that train, ride down a few stops, and feel like, hey, two stops before that felt more comfortable for me. So let me get back on this train and ride back a little bit. But it's really all about your comfortability and where you feel complete at. And, because I work with kids, that's what I try to teach them. Like, your transition is very personal, and I think everybody's transition is personal. And I think how far or how not far you transition, or that's a choice that is a choice of self. And, I think the biggest misconception is that people think that transitioning looks one way and that we all do it the same way. And it's not like that at all.
Now, being that I have two generations here,
yeah.
I do want to bring up one topic in here. It's not on paper, but I want to throw it in. So you mentioned something about, when you were, trans women that were coming up when you were coming up, how it was different. So what do you think the difference is now from when, the transsexual women, or however one might identify, from back then? How was the experience then versus, your experience now in this new generation? As far as
her answer that first.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the thing about it is that, there's more acceptance now, and there's more safer pathways to transition.
Yeah.
Everything from my experience was like we did a lot of stuff underground back then. So a lot of us didn't have doctors. We heavily relied on one another to get our HRT. A lot of us didn't get mental health therapy, and a lot of us did not really get our name changed legally. There were girls who were doing that, but survival was more of a priority than doing that at the time, and our survival did not require to have legal documentations. These girls today have careers, jobs, legal jobs, and have access to help with their legal documentation, name change, free assistance in doing that. I know girls who had made enough money to be able to pay for that. The doctors are more accepting of it. It's easier to just walk into a doctor's office and get HRT. The mental health people affirm everyone now. You can go in there with a beard and everything and get hormones. Back then, they would say to you, "Excuse me, Joe, Michael, no, we're not gonna. You're gonna have to keep coming back. We're not gonna give you your letter to get your age." They didn't affirm everyone back then. It was a lot harder to get that legally. So a lot of times we just took matters into our own hands and we got them the best way we knew how. And definitely I'm gonna end with this, is career-wise. Like, most of us were sex workers, and that was the way that we made our money. And now, I mean, there still are girls who are still doing sex work, but by no means do they. If you're doing sex work and you're transsexual, it's because you want to, not because you have to.
Yeah. And I guess, like, for my generation, everything, there's so many resources now. Like, the girls are spoiled. Like, they're pushing the girls through. Like, it should be no reason why the girls don't have their things in order, because there's so many places and things catering to us. But like she said, society is way more accepting, and the girls can actually like live their lives, like, to a degree, without, having so much, like we said before, pushback from society or healthcare, and, from the mental health system and all that stuff. So I think that, it's become very progressive. But now we're re-entering a time where they're trying to take a lot of that away now. So in certain places there still are very much a lot of resources, and it's very easy to become trans. You know what I mean? So I think, which is amazing, because at the end of the day, your body, your decision. If this is what you want to do, you should be able to do it, without being denied. You know what I mean? Like, if this is like who you are, and you are transitioning to become a beautiful woman or a handsome man, it's definitely, now is the time. It's like the golden era for that, in my opinion. For my generation. That's why there are so much more trans women, and the trans population now is so large. Like, the girls are being pushed out like in a factory. Not lying.
Yeah.
So. Love is the highest vibration.